Very good. All right, we'll see if the other guys have that too. All right, I'll start us the sponsors, and then we'll pick up on the Gemara. Year of Learning, Sue and Arnie Gerlich, in memory of Malka Perlman and Philip Mann, and Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, and Beryl ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. Yosef Meir ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Henya Rivka Pearl Rosner bas Harav Tzvi Hirsch. And in memory of family murdered in the Holocaust, Harav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. She'll share her children and grandchildren in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Harav Akiva, Marsha Federbush and family in memory of her husband, Dr. Uriel Paul Federbush, Uriel Pinchas ben Harav Shimon, Sharon and Fred Lisker, their family and many friends, in memory of her dear mom, Harriet Friedman, Edelbas Yaakov, Leslie and Gail Kaplan in memory of their parents, Harry and Marjorie Sedell, Irving and Pearl Kaplan, friends of Avi Gitler, Avrameir ben Shimon and Martha Gitler, Shana Bas Yeshaya, friends of Toby Peres, Saratova bat Yisrael Dov, friends of Malka Levy, Malka bat Yosef, friends of Joe Wolf, Yosef ben Chaim. Month of Learning by Melon Haran Haller in memory of his brother Yaakov ben Abraham, Jill and Perry Meltzer in memory of his father David ben Fishel Halevi, and mother Bela Bas and her mother Bela Bas Abraham, Del Budlander in memory of his wife Uthel Bas Yehuda Tzvi. Also by Stephanie and Fred Mortman, Month of Learning, and Rufur Shlema of her daughter Mazal bat Sarah Malka. Today being the 31st, we have no other items. Shema's having Aliyah, Crank, or Feel Vati Shir Shema Taliyah, and the Chol B'nai Israel, good Gaben Shtiach.
Amen.
Okay. All right.
Amen.
The Gemara today.
Today's the first, excuse me, Rabbi.
Yeah, there is no 31st.
There is no 31st in June.
Oh, today is the first? Okay, so I forgot. Sorry. Thank you.
Oh, you're half
Sharon
right.
David Karpel, a day of learning in memory of her brother Eliyahu Shalom ben Chaim Shmuel.
Good.
All right. Okay. Calendar I use has a 31st here. That's a little thing. Anyway. Okay.
Must be from.
We saw in our Gemara as we pick up on 81a, right? That there was this discussion, and we ended with this little bit of a gross discussion there. Plums and the right, spitting it out and the things like
Somebody else eating it?
right. Okay. I don't know. Anyway, Gemara is going to continue, we said, dealing with some issues of shiurim. And then it's going to continue issues with the whole concern about eating on Yom Kippur, and how is that to be defined by, number one, the time period, as well as the measurement, and secondly, what really is food? Do we consider something like brine to be food, and therefore one would be over, okay, for eating on Yom Kippur on that situation? So coming back to the issue of shiurim, ha'elchel v'hashoteh ein mitztarfin, says the Gemara. It seems to tell us that eating and drinking, okay, and if they were minimum, less than the minimum shiur, okay, what happens? They don't join together. Mantana, according to whom, okay, was this taught? Amar Rav Chisda, says Rav Chisda. B'machloket shnuya. It was taught in a argument, Rabbi Yoshua, and it was the view of Rabbi Yoshua. What's important for us in the language of the Gemara, I'm suggesting is therefore we need to also see who was the Baal Machloket of Rabbi Yoshua in this case. T'tznan, as was taught in the Mishnah, Klal Amar Rabbi Yoshua, that he gave a general statement, Kol shetum'ato v'shi'uro shaveh mitztaref. So Rabbi Yoshua is making a general principle here that for items to join together, they have to be the same level of tuma and the exact same measurement. Now, then they would join together. Now, the Gemara is going to pick up on this, but what's important for our purposes, I felt, was the fact that notice he has combined two different aspects. One of its level of tuma, the other its shiur. Therefore, maybe we are going to say, yes, that when the Gemara says it has to be both a shiur and a time element, kadei achilat pras, for example, that we saw previously. Okay, so that maybe you need both criteria and can say, yes, that applies just as it applies now in the klal that Rabbi Yoshua is giving us. Okay, so we see now the connection between that. But the Gemara picks up and says, to clarify that klal, tumato velo shiuro, if they were the same level of ritual impurity, but not the same measurement, shiuro velo tumato, or they were the same measurement and not the same level of tuma, right? Take an example. You could have tumas mace, which would mean 7 days, and you could have, say tumas nevela, which means only up till that night, right? So that would be two different examples of two different levels of tuma, okay? Could be the same shiur, but different levels. Lo tumato velo shiuro, and if it doesn't have either the same level of tuma or the same amount of measure, ein mitztarfin, they don't join together. Now, Rav Nachman Amar, afilu tema Rabbanan. You might even say, according to Rav Nachman, that apparently there was rabbis that argued against Rabbi Yoshua. But you could say, he argues, that according to their view, there could be a situation. Ad kan lo ka'amre Rabbanan hatam, that up to this point, we heard the rabbis, okay, were saying in that regard about different measures combining with levels of pure ritual impurity. Inyan tuma. Maybe they only applied it in regards to one component, namely one aspect of common ritual impurity. The shem tuma chadhu. Why? Because there we might say that we acknowledge that there are different levels of tuma. Bahai lo miyad vadate. But in regards to measurements, right, we said there that's dependent upon whether the person has a sense of satisfaction, okay, that they have eaten enough mentally to feel they're no longer hungry. If that's the case, as Zev had said the other day, it's more individual case, and therefore that won't work. B'chein amar Reish Lakish. Okay, and that says Reish Lakish, something similar. B'machloket shnuya, that this issue was taught and learned based on a machloket. V'Rabbi Yoshua he, and it's the view of Rabbi Yoshua, T'tznan, as was taught in a Mishnah, Klal amar Rabbi Yoshua v'chulei, that Rabbi Yoshua made this general principle. V'Rabbi Yochanan amar, and according to Rabbi Yochanan, afilu tema Rabbanan, you might even say that the rabbis would agree with Rabbi Yoshua under certain circumstances, namely ad kan lo ka'amre Rabbanan hatam, that up to this point, the rabbi said their view, right, on that combination of aspects, Tuma and Shiur, Ela Inyan Tuma, because it only applied to Tuma, ritual impurity. Aval Hacha, Mishum Yetuve Da'atehu. But here, because of the fact that it's an issue of an individual's mind being settled, V'hai loka miyad vadate. And in this case, if the person's mind is not settled, that they basically had enough that they're no longer suffering, then we said, then that would be a situation that the person would be over on Yom Kippur. Okay? So that issue of settling the mind then is a component that could not necessarily be joined with the shiur aspect. Okay? And that's the point. And that's where we now move on to a new Mishnah. Okay? Matnitin, achal v'shata behelem echad. Okay? Since we were talking about two aspects, could they be mitztaref if done, right, in a single time frame, that might join together? So therefore the Mishnah tells us, what about if one ate and drank all in a single lapse of awareness? Person forgot that it was Yom Kippur, let's say, right? Eino chayav ela chatat echad. Okay, he's not subject to being liable except for a single chatas offering. Achal v'asa melacha, if he ate and did some kind of labor, chayav shnei chataot, then he would be liable to bring two separate sin offerings. Achal ochlin she'enan ru'iyim la'achila, if he ate something that is normally not considered an appropriate, viable, real food stuff. Vishata mashkin she'enan ru'uyim l'shtiya. I'm going to put the vav here as an or, drank something that normally would not be considered a realistic, appropriate drink. For example, the Mishnah goes on, Vishatat sir umorias, that he drank either brine or fish brine, patur, he would be exempt. Okay? Now, our Gemara tells us, Amar Reish Lakish, says Reish Lakish, Mipnei ma lo ne'emra azhara be'inui. Reish Lakish's question, remember, is much broader. Normally we find that we don't punish an individual according to the Torah unless we have both a warning and then the punishment. Okay? And so if that's the case, Reish Lakish is asking, why don't we have an example of a clear warning telling us, you should not do X on Yom Kippur, right? Mipnei ma lo ne'amra azhara be'inui. Why then wasn't there any kind of warning, right, in regards to the issue of affliction? And he attempts to answer, Mishum de lo efshar, because he argues it wasn't possible to write it in an appropriate manner. Hechi nichtov, asks the Gemara. How should it have been written? Nichtov Rachmana, let the Torah, in other words, let Hashem have written it in the Torah, lo yochal, simply saying one shouldn't eat. Achila b'kazayas. Okay, but we know that eating is measured, okay, normally, okay, regarding an olive amount. Nichtov Rachmana, lo te'una. Then say one shouldn't afflict themselves. Right? Kum echol mashma. Okay? So therefore, we have a problem with that, because if it were said simply, don't be afflicted, we may have thought, what does that refer to? Okay? In other words, maybe it refers to having to do a what I'm going to call for the moment, a positive act by which one needs to be afflicted. Like we saw previously, for example, sit in the hot sun, okay? Or who knows what, okay? In other words, in this case, maybe it means one should afflict themselves by overeating. We saw the issue of achila gasa, right? So what happens? Matkifla Rav Hoshaya. He challenged this by pointing out the following. Maybe another way it could have been written. V'nichtov Rachmana, Hishomer pen lo te'uneh. Guard yourself lest you not be afflicted. Im kain, nafishi lahu lave. If that was the way it was worded, okay, then we would see that it should have many more negative prohibitions. Okay.
Rabbi Green,
Yes, Zev.
suppose you feel afflicted, but you eat things or you eat and drink things that are not fit for eating and drinking, but then you no longer feel afflicted. Does that mean that you're not potter, like the Mishnah says?
Could be. You still have, in other words, number one, you did an act, right, that was not appropriate by drinking this, whatever it is, okay? So that, right?
And it relieves your affliction when you do
right.
that.
In other words, what the Gemara is going to show us ultimately as we continue is that affliction means restraining from something, not doing something that's going to result in the affliction. Okay? But it's going to take us like the whole Amud to get through that. Mat kifla Rav Bivi bar Abaye. So Rav Bivi bar Abaye again objects. Give another example. Nichtov Rachmana, Hishomer b'mitzvat inui. He suggests the Torah could have written, guard yourself in the mitzvah of affliction. Im kain, says the Gemara, Hishomer delav. If that's the case, okay, then you should be guarding yourself about a prohibition. Is that to be considered a prohibition? Okay, love, that's already a prohibition. Hishomer da'aseh, if you're going to say guard yourself about a positive act, aseh, then that's already telling us to do a positive act. Matkifla Rav Ashi, and so Rav Ashi challenges it. Nichtov, let the Torah write, al tasur min ha'inui. Okay, namely, phrase it, do not stray from afflicting yourself. Kasha, says the Gemara at this point. Indeed, it seems problematic to come up with the appropriate language, as Reish Lakish had said to us. So what happens? The Gemara continues this discussion and tells us the following. Vatana maite le mehacha. And Tana teaches that maybe we should bring this issue of the prohibitions from a different source, the issue of affliction on Yom Kippur. We have the pasuk that says, "Ve'initem et nafshotechem b'chol melacha lo ta'asu," and you shall afflict your souls and do no manner of work. Yechol yehei anush al tosefet melacha. It might be that one would get punished for this additional act of affliction by doing labor. Talmud lomar, b'chol hanefesh asher ta'aseh kol melacha be'etzem hayom hazeh. We have another pasuk, therefore, that refers to labor as being carried out on that very day. right? It's on the day of Yom Kippur. Al itzumo shel Yom Anush Karet, right? On that day, okay, that same day, the person would be punished by karet. Ve'eno anush karet al tosefet malacha. But they would not be punished for any additional or extension, okay, of prohibited labor beyond that day. Let's go on, says the Braita. Yechol lo yehe anush karet al tosefet malacha. We said that one would not be punished by performing an extension of this labor on the day. Aval yehe anush karet al tosefet anui. But maybe they might be punished for any further extension of affliction. Talmud Lomar, again we have a pasuk that says, Ki chol hanefesh asher lo te'uneh be'etzem hayom hazeh v'nichrata. This pasuk tells us it should not be afflicted on that same day. He'll be cut off from his people, right? Al in itzumo shel yom, for doing it on that the same day, anush karet, he is punished with karet. Ve'eno anush karet al tosefet inui, but he's not punished with karet for any extension of the affliction. Again, says the Braita, Yechol lo yehe bichlal onesh. One might have thought maybe, right, wouldn't be punished for any extension of any act associated with karet. Aval yehe muzhar al tosefet malacha, but may be warned about additional work. Talmud Lomar, again a pasuk tells us, V'chol malacha lo ta'asu be'etzem hayom hazeh. No work being done on that same day. Al itzumo shel yom hu muzhar. On the essence of that day, he's being warned. Ve'eno muzhar al tosefet malacha. And not being warned again about any additional or extension of labor, right? So therefore, he wouldn't receive malchus in that case. Yechol lo yehe muzhar al tosefet malacha, again the Braita. Aval yehe muzhar al tosefet inui. Maybe one would become then warned about any additional extension of affliction. V'dinhu, and this does seem fairly logical. Umar Malacha will try to do a fortiori argument. Kal v'chomer. Umar Malacha shenoheget b'shabbatot v'yom tov. And whereas we're told regarding work on his Sabbath or holiday, eino mushar aleha, he's not warned about it. Inui she'eino noheg b'shabbatot v'yom tov. Affliction which is not observed as part of Shabbat or Yom Tov. Eino din shelo yehe mushar elav. Is it not logical here, okay, that he shouldn't not be warned about it? Aval azhara le'inui sheyom atzmo lo lamadnu minay. But in regards to a warning about the very day itself, okay, we haven't learned. From where have we derived it? Lo yomar onesh b'mlacha. It clearly says that it does, right? It does not say that there's a punishment in regards to the kind of karet, regards the kind of work. De gamar me'inui, right? That maybe we would learn that from the issue of affliction. Uma inui she'eno noheg b'shabbatot v'yom tov, and where affliction is not practiced, let's say, the custom of Shabbos and Yom Tov, anush karet, okay, yet we have a prohibition of karet, melacha, shenoheget b'shabbatot v'yomim tovim, whereas work, which is, okay, permitted, I'm going to say, under certain circumstances on Shabbat and Yom Tov. For example, the work of the avoda, the sacrificial acts done in the Beis HaMikdash on Shabbat. You still slaughter, you still skin, you still do all of these items that normally would have been prohibited on Shabbat, which are forms of malacha, but they're still done, right? Lo kol shekain. How much more so? Isn't that the case? So the Gemara says, Lama ne'amar, what the Braita is asking. Mufna lahakish v'ladun mimenu gzeira shava. Okay, maybe we're going to say that that issue is extraneous, and therefore it's allowed to be used for a gzeira shava. Ne'amar onesh be'inui. We find that it says a punishment with regards to affliction, namely karet, if one doesn't do it. V'ne'amar onesh b'melacha, and we find punishment in regards to work. Ma melacha lo anash ela im kain his here. The same way melacha on Shabbat or Yom Tov, there's no punishment unless we have the warning. Af inui. So likewise with affliction, lo anash ela im kain his here. Maybe there too the person would not be punished unless we have a warning. Now the Gemara goes on to tell us ikala mifrach, but we can challenge that gezerah shava. Mala inui shalo hutar miklalo, regarding right affliction, it has no exceptions from its general principle. Tomar b'melacha, would you say regarding work, shehutra miklala, where there are, I'm going to say, exceptions from its general principle? The example I gave, slaughtering animals on Shabbat, offering incense. Ella, rather, lo yamar onesh be'inui, rather we don't have to say that there's a punishment with the affliction. De gamar mimelacha, because one can learn it from the example of the labor. Mamelacha shehutra miklala, the same way that with work, labor, there are exceptions from the general principle, and therefore otherwise anush karet, there is a punishment of karet. Inui shelo hutar miklalo, affliction where there is no exceptions to the general principle. Lo kol shekain, how much more so? Lama ne'amar, why do we say this? Mufna lahakish v'ladun mimena gzeira shava. Again, we'll say that it's extraneous, and therefore, okay, we should be able to utilize it for a gzeira shava. Ne'amar onesh be'inui, v'ne'amar onesh b'melacha. We see there is a punishment regarding affliction and a punishment regarding labor. Ma melacha, whereas with the labor, anash v'his here, at the punishment and then as well as a warning, af inui, anash v'his here. So with affliction, there's punishment and the Gemara says, ikala mifrach. Again, we can challenge it. Ma lemlacha, whereas with labor, shekein noheget b'shabbatot v'yamim tovim, that there is some aspects of labor carried out on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Tomar be'inui, are you going to say with regards to the affliction associated with Yom Kippur, she'eino noheg b'shabbatot v'yamim tovim, that's not associated whatsoever with Shabbos or Yom Tov. And so therefore, Amar Ravina says, Hi Tana, no, this Tana, what he was teaching was a different Gezerah Shava. Etzem, Gamar. He learned it from a different verbal analogy on that same day, is what he based it on. Mufna, that is extraneous. The elo mifne, because were it not to be extraneous, ikala mifrach, kideparchinen, it's possible to challenge the Gzera Shava and take it apart as we did previously, to refute it. Now, says the Gemara, La'aye afnuye mufne. Okay? Are we going to say, though, that it certainly is available? Chamisha kra'ektive b'malacha. We have 5 psukim written regards to the issue of work. Chad la'azhara diyamama, 1 to warn us in regarding the day. V'chad la'azhara delelia, 1 to warn us in regarding the night. V'chad la'onesh diyamama, 1 to give us the punishment for the day. V'chad la'onesh delelia, 1 to give us the punishment for the night. V'chad la'afnuye, and 1 is extraneous. Lamigmar inui mimulacha, in order to learn the issue of affliction from the issue of work, bein diyamama, bein delelia, whether it's in regarding the day or regarding the night. Now, a new statement. Rabbi Yishmael Tana. Rabbi Yishmael taught a different kind of Gzera Shava. Ne'amar kan inui, v'ne'amar lahalan inui. It says in one place affliction, and elsewhere we have a pasuk that refers to affliction. Okay, namely, right, one that is the situation describing the rape of a woman. Lo anash ela im kain his here. One is not punished without there having been a warning. Afkan lo anash ela im kain his here. So likewise, right, we don't punish unless we have a warning. The pasuk, by the way, with regards to the rape, is in Dvarim because he has afflicted his neighbor's wife. Rab Acha bar Yaakov Amar Yalef Shabbat Shabbaton. He's going to give a different example, all right, of a way of finding a Gzera Shava. Learn the phrase Shabbat Shabbaton, Mishabbat Breshit. We have it found in Yom Kippur, referred to as Shabbat Shabbaton. We've got the Shabbat Breshit, in other words, the initial Shabbat, okay, observance. Also, Malahalan, whereas there, Lo Anash Ela Im Kain is here. One is not punished unless they're warned. Afkan Lo Anash Ela Im Kain is here. So here they're not punished also unless they're warned. Rav Papa Amar. However, Rav Papa says as we go on to the next. Okay, Amud. Who gufe Shabbat ikre. But that itself is called Shabbat. Dichtiv tishbatu Shabbatchem. Because it says you shall rest on the Sabbath. Bishlama Rav Papa. Lo Amar Karav Achabar Yaakov. That's understandable. Why then Rav Papa didn't say the same thing, okay, the same kind of Gezerah Shava as Rav Acha bar Yaakov. Dekra dichtiv begufe adif. Why? Because we say that a pasuk dealing with its own subject, okay, is appropriate. Ela Rav Acha bar Yaakov ma'itama lo amar karav Papa. So why didn't Rav Yaakov say the same as Rav Papa? He needed it, right, because of something else, as was taught. Ve'initem et nafshotechem b'tish'a l'chodesh. Namely, okay, when it says keep your Shabbat for which you're taught, all right, and you've right, and then another verse says, and you shall afflict your souls on the 9th day of the month, from evening until evening. You shall rest on the Sabbath. Okay? Namely, Talmud Lomar Ba'erev. It's said in the evening. I Ba'erev, if we're talking about the evening, Yechol Misha Techshach. Maybe that only applies once it's dark. What do we do? Matchil u'mit'aneh miba'od yom. It means we begin the fast before it gets dark, while it's still day. Mikan shemosifin mechol al hakodesh. From here we see that we add from the daytime, from the unconsecrated time to the sacred time. Okay? Now, ve'en li ela b'knisato. Fine, says the Gemara. That clarifies it for the beginning of Yom Kippur. B'yetziato minayin. How do we know what that has to do later on with the other part? Right? The end of the day. Talmud lomar me erev ad erev. It's said from one evening until another evening. Ve'en lo li ela Yom HaKippurim. I have then Yom Kippur, Yamim Tovim, and other holidays. Minayin. How do we know this? Talmud lomar again, Tishbatu. It uses the phrase, right? Tishbatu. You shall rest. Ein li ela Yamim Tovim Shabbatot. Minayin. Hi seems to apply to Yontifs and Shabbos. How do we know it applies to anything else? Talmud lomar Shabbatchem, because it says in another place again, right? That your Shabbat, in other words, your day of rest. Ha ketzad, how is that? Kol makom shene'amar shavut, any place where it refers to shavut, resting. Mikan shemosifin mechol al hakodesh. From here we see that we add from the unconsecrated, the non-sacred weekday to the holy, right, day of Yom Kippur. V'tana de etzem. But the Gemara then tells us another example was to make the Gezerah Shava from the word etzem, that day, that same day. Hai b'tisha lechodesh. And then it said for the 9th day of the month. Ma'i avidle. Okay, what did he do with it? Right? Mibaye le'likadetane chia bar Rav Medifti. He needed it as was taught by Rav Chia bar Difti, the Tani Chia bar Difti, who taught v'initim et nafshotechem b'tish'a, right? That you will afflict your souls on the 9th day of the month. V'chi b'tish'a mat'anim. Do we really afflict ourselves on the 9th day? V'halo ba'asor mat'anim. We afflict ourselves on the 10th day of the month of Tishrei. Elo lamar lecha. What does it come to tell us? Kol ha'ochel v'shoteh b'tshi'i. Whoever eats and drinks on the 9th, ma'ale alav hakatuv ki'ilu hit'ana tshi'i v'asiri. Okay? It's then ascribed to him the credit, right? The zechus, it's as if he fasted both on the 9th.
Days.
Okay. We go on to a slightly new topic from our Mishnah, right? What about inappropriate items that aren't really foods? Achal ochlin she'ein ru'iyim la'achila, right? Something that's not fit for eating. Amar Rabba, kas pilpulei biyoma de kippuri. Let's assume that he was chewing raw pepper on Yom Kippur. Patur, he's exempt. Kas zangvila biyoma de kippuri. He was chewing ginger on Yom Kippur. Patur, he's exempt. Meitive, but we'll challenge that with the following. Haya Rabbi Meir Omer, Rabbi Meir once said, Memashma shene amar, from the fact that the pasuk says, Va'araltem orlato et pirio. Okay, a pasuk says clearly, right, that you shall count the fruit of it as forbidden. Right? Namely, what is that telling me? Eini yodea she'etz ma'achalhu. Don't I know then that either pepper or ginger then, if it seems to come from a plant rather than a tree, as a result then, don't am I say that therefore it is a kind of food, because it might be subject to orla. Ela ma Talmud lomar eitz ma'achal. What do we mean by a tree appropriate for eating? Eitz shatam eitzo upiryo shaveh. Maybe we're talking about something where the fruit, okay, and the fruit and the wood of the tree actually taste the same. Okay. In other words, a tree that it itself is eaten in addition to the fruit. Okay. Have omer, zet pilpalim. Maybe that's the example of the pepper. L'lamedcha shehapilpalim chayavin ba'orla. That peppers would be subject to orla. Ve'ein Eretz Yisrael chasera klum. And we know that the land of Israel is not missing any kind of foodstuff. Shene amar, lo techsar kol ba. That it said nothing is lacking in it. Lo kasha. That's not necessarily problematic. Ha b'retivta, v'ha b'yaveshta. No, why is it a problem? Because on the one hand, pepper might be considered a food, okay? Why? Because we say maybe that's referring to a kind of pepper, like a bell pepper when it's moist. But when it's dry, okay, that might be referring to, let's say, black pepper, okay, which is not considered a food. Amarle Ravina, the Merimah. And so Ravina says, V'ha'amar Rav Nachman. But didn't Rav Nachman once say, Hai himalta, da'ata mibehan du'e, sharia, that this kind of himalta, it's a kind of cooked ginger that comes from India, isn't it permitted? Umavarchinan ale borei priha adama. Not only that, but when we eat it, we say a blessing of borei priha adama on it. Lo kasha. Again, that may not be problematic. Ha berativta, vaha biabashta. Here, maybe we're talking about wet ginger that's considered a food, but dry ginger would not be the case. So now a braita. Tanu Rabbanan. Achal alei kianim. Let's say somebody ate leaves from a reed, patur, they're exempt. Lulave gifanim. If he ate shoots from grape shoots, grapevine shoots, chayav, he would be over. Elu hein lulaveg fanim. Okay, what are these grape shoots? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Migdalah, he said, Kol shaliv luvo merosh Hashanah v'ad Yom HaKippurim. These are shoots that sprout out during the time of the year between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And they're soft enough, apparently, to be edible. Rav Kahana Amar, Kol Shaloshim Yom. He argued for whole 30 days, okay, before Yom Kippur they sprout. Tanya Kavate the Rabbi Yitzchak Migdalah. And we have a braita taught, okay, in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak Migdalah, Achal alei kanim patur. If he ate leaves from reeds, he's exempt. V'lulvei gefanim, but shoots from, we said, grapevines, chayav, be obligated. Elu hein lulvei gefanim, and these are what we mean by grapevine shoots. Kol shaliv levo merosh Hashanah v'ad Yom HaKippurim. Anything that the shoots come forward and they sprout between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Now, what about another example from our Mishnah? Shatat sir or morias patur. If he drank brine or fish brine, okay? Apparently they are, one is just brine, one is pickling liquid, okay? Right? Ha chometz, this would seem to imply that if the person drank vinegar, chayav, he would be, right, obligated, over on Yom Kippur. Matnitin mani, our Mishnah then is according to whom? Rebbe. It seems to be according to Rebbe. The Tanya who taught Rebbe Omer, chometz meshiv et hanefesh, that vinegar revives the soul. In other words, vinegar would be considered a beverage. Okay. Now, what happened? A story in response to that statement of Rebbe's. Darash Rav Gidl Bar Menashe, Mibere Denerish. Rav Gidl Bar Menashe from the town of Beri Nerish taught in a public forum, right? Ein halacha karebi, that the law is not like Rebbe. In other words, vinegar, he said, would not be considered apparently a beverage. Lashana, okay, what happened? According to the next year, nafke kuli alma, all of the people in the town went out. Mazgu v'shatu chala. They mixed themselves vinegar with something else, water perhaps, who knows, right? And they drank it on Yom Kippur. Shama Rav Gidl v'ikpad. Rav Gidl heard about it and he was incensed. He was angry. Amar, and he said to them, Amar de Amari Ana diavad. He said, when I said it in regards to something that was after the fact. L'chatchila mi amare. Did I say it in regards to initially doing it? Amar de amre ana porta. When I said it, did I say it was regarding only a small amount? Tuva mi amari. Did I say that it was in regards to a lot? Amar de amre anachai. When I said it, did I say it was in regards to pure vinegar? Mazug mi amare. Did I say, okay, anything about diluted vinegar? In those cases, that would be prohibited. And we stop right there because we'll start with a new Mishnah, right? Tomorrow on 82a. All right. So, okay. Right. Reminder that we're getting close to the end of Gemara Yoma. Right. And we'll be needing Sukkah for the, I think it's the Friday, right? Which is the, what? Friday, let me just check, hold on. Yeah, Friday, the 9th of July. All right. So everybody take care, stay well, and
Thank you, Reb.
we'll continue, all right? Okay.
All the best.
Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Robert Green, what will be our venue? Where are we going to meet?
Well, we're discussing that issue, Bob. There's been a slight, I'll tell you, I had a call from Mesh Kranzler yesterday.
Yes.
Right? And Mesh said to me, do we realize that if we, when we go live, so to speak,
Right.
in person, okay, that there'll be about 5 people from the 830 million that will want to switch. And therefore that might result in the falling apart of that 830 million.
Mm.
So I said, you know, when I was approached, most people thought we were going to go back to way, you know, doing it after the 730 early minion and then at 8:30 continue like we've been. But then as I thought about it more, I said, well, if we were to switch and do the exact opposite, like the early group used to do, okay? Let's say start at 7:15 or 7:30, okay? And then, right? Well, that also brings about the same problem. There would then be another, likewise, 4 or 5 fellas that would have to leave that minion and wind up going to the 8:30 minion.
Right.
Okay. So I don't know if it's my decision, because for me personally, it really doesn't make a big difference. Either I daven first at 7:30 and we do the daf at 8:30, or we do the daf first and then I daven afterwards.
Right.
So
Right.
it's the same, so to
Right.
speak, time frame for me. What's simpler for me personally is the fact that by doing the daf in person and Zoom, okay, because we would need to do both, means at the end I don't have to leave Monday and Thursday davening early, right? Because I can stay to the end of davening and then we just go in to wherever we're going to learn. It just doesn't apply though to the fact that we need a place that has tables. So it would mean we would, that's the issue. That if
Right.
they're going to daven in the, still in the base midrash, the 8:30 minion, okay, we would need to either meet upstairs or in the library,
Right.
okay? Whereas when I last spoke to the rabbi about it, I spoke to him about, was there any chance that we would wind up switching locations of the minyanim? Because I thought maybe that would have some impact, but I don't know. It's not, as I said, it's basically really not my decision to make. I
Why
will
can't
do
the
the
8:30, why can't the 8:30 minion daven upstairs?
Well, that's one option. The other option is that, okay, while we don't always finish in time, they could still come into the sanctuary, into the show, because we're usually finished by then, and we would go back into there. But like I said, I don't feel it's really not my decision to make, because I'll do the daf regardless.
Okay. Okay.
All right, so maybe we'll try to clarify it with Dave Cheslow, or I sent the rabbi an email just for his input. Haven't gotten a response back yet. But
Okay.
I think David, his attitude was, last he mentioned it, to go, have it the 7:30 and then go right into the daf at 8:30.
Okay.
All right.
Whatever it is, we'll hang in there and wait until
It's next
the
week, anyway.
process.
It's not yet anyway.
That's why we got the week to try to work
Right,
it out.
another week.
Right. We can work it
Okay,
out.
guys. Right.
Take care.
Okay.
Be well.
Everybody be well. Take care.